Order. The question is that Amendment F, as in F for Freddie, be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Sir Mike Penning and Nigel Evans. Tellers for the noes, Wendy Morton and Ian Stewart.
For the government in over 100, possibly over 200. So that's why the opposition have done this. It's pretty clear. And I think we should just take a step back on all of this. Remember when Mrs May became Prime Minister? She became Prime Minister because David Cameron, having called the referendum and had it go against him, decided to walk away. So Mrs May had one job. Her one job was to unite the country behind Brexit. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and if the vote is anything like everyone is predicting tonight, she will have totally failed. She won't even have managed to unite her own party behind her version of Brexit. And that is the extent of the crisis the country's in, of course, following on from the general election, which she called in 2017, in the hopes that would give her a majority to deliver Brexit in her terms. And of course, she lost her majority then. So whatever happens tonight, the country is in crisis. It does not know where it's heading on Brexit. And crucially, the two sides, those who want to do something to mitigate the offence of Brexit and those who want to go for a hard Brexit, are both still rampant and pushing it. I mean, nobody at the time of the referendum campaign talked about welcoming the idea of a hard Brexit, leaving with no deal. That is now Boris Johnson, the favourite to lead the Tory party. That is now his primary objective. And he, of course, believes that he will benefit from chaos for Mrs May. So there's an awful lot in play. And it's very important because if you believe anything like the number of independent experts and government experts, the consequences of leaving without a deal, which, as Professor Vernon Bogdanor rightly reminded you, is what's on the statute books at the moment. It's only 73 days' time of leaving without that. The economic consequences and the social consequences, many people believe will be pretty severe, because remember, all those agreements that are proposed, a transition period, are citizens' rights, all of those would go. And so we are heading into uncharted waters now, as Mrs May said. She's probably going to try and come back with another version of this deal. But look at it. Her opponents have got their tails up tonight.
Yeah, extraordinary times. Adam, thank you very much indeed for describing them. And Vernon Bogdanor is here with me now, alongside John Craig, our chief political correspondent, Isabel Oakeshott, political journalist and commentator, and the former Downing Street Director of Communications, Sir Craig Oliver. Lots to discuss as this voting on that amendment continues in the House of Commons. And let me start with you, Professor Bogdanor. Adam Bolton put it there. The Prime Minister's totally failed at the one job she had. Extraordinary times. I mean, there's no sense at all that this is a night that could lead to the Prime Minister standing down.
Well, perhaps Adam Bolton was a bit unfair to the Prime Minister's difficulties. The Tory party is riven in two on the question of Brexit. That reflects, I think, a division in the country. It's division almost straight down the middle. And at the moment, she's holding a cabinet together with extreme Brexiteers like Liam Fox, Michael Gove, Andrew Leadsom, with people who may be argued to be soft Brexiteers, Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, David Gauke, the Lord Chancellor, and a few others. And the compromise they've agreed on is the deal. So that itself is something of an achievement, as it were, to have got this far without breaking up the Tory party and breaking up her cabinet. But here, it may be she does have a hurdle which she can't overcome. We don't yet know what the size of the defeat will be. I imagine if it's not too heavy, she would try and bring it back again. She has been dogged and determined. She's gone on, and often commentators said, well, this is her last week in office, but she's still there. Boris Johnson isn't still there. David Davis isn't still there. Lots of others aren't still there. She's still there leading the government. So she's had a problem which has defeated so many Tory prime ministers, the last one being David Cameron, but also John Major and Margaret Thatcher, of holding the Tory party together on this very toxic European issue.
Werner, thanks very much indeed. Just want to focus for a moment on the Chamber of the House of Commons there. As you can see, MPs have already only voted on an amendment to Theresa May's withdrawal agreement at the moment, and those that have voted returning to the Chamber. And just wanting you to focus, if you can, on the gentleman in the olive green suit with his back to us, who I think is Labour's Clive Lewis, perhaps. The woman then stooping down to talk to someone in a wheelchair who is Tulip Siddiq, and this shows just how crucial this vote is this evening. She's the Labour MP who has postponed a caesarean birth. She had planned a caesarean procedure planned for today. She's postponed it to come and vote. And as you can see, I think you can just see the wheels of the wheelchair there. I think she's already voted in this one, and presumably will stay there for the next vote, which will be on Theresa May's exit deal, and that should happen within the next half an hour or so, judging on the number of MPs who've filed back after voting on this amendment. John Craig, our chief political correspondent, is with me. Let's just focus on that, John.
I was about to mention that, yes.
It is quite extraordinary. I mean, you just explained the procedures. There are meant to be pairing procedures, aren't there, that if you have to have something like this, you can then more or less cancel out your vote with somebody from the opposition.
I don't know if
trust each other.
I don't know if you've ever seen that great play, This House, which is all about the late 70s, and a rather comical account of some of the dramatic ways the then Labour government was trying to win votes, sick MPs being brought in on drips and so on. Yeah. What has happened today, in fact yesterday in the House of Commons, Harriet Harman and one or two other Labour MPs said to the Speaker that she should be allowed a proxy vote. This is Tulip Siddiq. She's 9 months pregnant. She had already announced that she was going to delay her caesarean, but a lot of her fellow Labour MPs said this is daft. She should be allowed to vote by proxy. And the Speaker got quite cross about it yesterday, one of many occasions he got quite cross in the last few weeks, and said that we've discussed this in various committees, this should be allowed. Anyway, and of course the government has said, well, she could be paired. Now, I don't know whether any MPs are paired tonight. I suspect possibly not. Do you remember there was a row a few months ago over the Lib Dem MP...
there was a breach of trust,
yes,
wasn't there?
Brandon Lewis
I think
voted.
this has really rattled people.
Joe Swinson, who was on maternity leave, that was it. Right. But anyway, so she's decided to come in. They're bound to try and sort this out, because I think I'm right in saying there's another Labour MP who's pregnant at the moment as well. Right. I assume they're both there, but this just shows what a crucial vote it is.
Well, I mean, it does show what a crucial vote it is, but Isabel Oakeshott, I mean, it's not as if the numbers are likely to be close.
No,
I mean,
I think it also
this normally happens, it's going to be on a knife edge.
I think to many people this just shows how stuck in some ridiculous dark ages Parliament actually is. I mean, this is a ludicrous thing. Yeah. But however, let's not feel too sorry for the little baby, because I'm sure there'll be some fun conversations when it's old enough to understand about how it was delayed so that it could...
But it's got to go through the lobbies.
But the thing you've got to remember is what's coming next. Is there going to be a no confidence vote? Yes. And that then becomes absolutely crucial.
But it won't happen this evening.
But I think the hope from both sides actually is to get it done tomorrow.
Well, let's just get up to that point then. We're all expecting Theresa May to lose tonight, and Labour have said, Jeremy Corbyn said on Sunday it would happen very soon. They will table a vote of no confidence in the government. That could lead to a general election.
So the signals coming out of number 10 tonight are they expect to lose big, and I think even allowing for expectation management, they are thinking this is going to be a seismic defeat. The thing to watch for is what does Theresa May do immediately after that? Does she do what David Cameron did when he lost in the Syria vote?
2013.
Immediately walk to the dispatch box and say, I get it? Or does she say, I'm coming back for another go? I think a lot of... She's probably already decided what she's going to do, and whether or not she's actually got something else to say that allows things to move on and be reshaped.
Well, we know Number 10 did say today that she will come to the dispatch box after the big vote, regardless of the outcome. But of course, it may well, the next few days may be taken out of her hands, of course, if Mr Corbyn moves a vote of no confidence. That debate will happen. If he puts it down tonight, it'll happen tomorrow. If he doesn't do it till tomorrow, it'll be Thursday.
But,
Tory MPs are on a three-line whip for Thursday.
Doesn't that then unite the Tory party? I mean, you get a partisan attack from the other side, and there you are, split all ways.
At the moment, there's no expectation that a vote of confidence would succeed in Labour's terms, and it seems that the rationale for doing it, therefore, seems very odd. But it allows them then to move on to their next phase of their prong of attack, which may be to push for a second referendum. I just wanted to reflect a little on the Prime Minister's speech, and I thought that she made a bit of a mistake, actually, ramping up in that very kind of historical way about what a big moment this was. If she's going to lose, was that really wise?
Indeed. I'm just going to concentrate on that shot in the House of Commons. The aftermath of the votes on an Irish backstop amendment that, as you can see, would give, well, certainly in the House of Commons' mind, would give the UK power to terminate the Irish backstop without the EU's permission. I'm not sure the EU would see it that way if this amendment passes. And there you have it. We're going to show you the numbers on the side of the screen there. The way these things work is after the votes are counted, as the MPs have passed through the lobbies, as they're called, the tellers then assemble in front of the mace, in front of the Speaker's chair there, and the ayes and the noes will report how many MPs voted either way. Now, the expectation, John Craig, the expectation is that this one will not pass.
This is a fairly hard-line Brexiteer amendment. I mean, the names on it: John Barron, Andrew Rossendale, for example, Frank Field, Labour Brexiteer, his name's on it as well, Sir Edward Lee as well, Sir Mike Penning, Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker, he's a pretty hard-line Brexiteer. This is going to be heavily defeated.
And Vernon Bogdan, I mean, as I was saying there, I mean, if it did pass, the fact is that in the withdrawal agreements, there's no way that that the UK can terminate the backstop on its own.
Absolutely right. If this passes, it negates the withdrawal agreement. It's then a different agreement, not the one negotiated by Theresa May. So in effect, it negates the withdrawal agreement. So that means it's rejected if this amendment is passed, which I don't expect it will be. Taking up a point which was made earlier about what happens if and possibly when Theresa May loses the vote, it's very difficult for her, I think, to follow David Cameron's precedent when he was defeated on the vote about armed intervention in Syria, because the opposition all knew what they wanted, which was no armed intervention. But here the opposition are divided between incompatibles, people who want a harder Brexit and people who want a softer Brexit or no Brexit at all. So there's no way she can say, I bow to the will of the House, because there is no will of the House or no positive will of the House.
So what does she do?
And also something has to happen. That's the difference, isn't it? There isn't a position where you can just walk away. We have to...
But I think the point
she's got
is
to go
not,
back to the EU, isn't she? That's what she's
The point is not, do I bow to the will of the House? The point is, do I accept that my version of the deal is dead? And that is the point that she... And I suspect she's going to be very unwilling to do that. Yes. But if the numbers are that high, it may be possible that she just feels so shamed into it that she accepts that there needs to be another path, and that she indicates that something else is going to have to... that she's going to have to come forward with some other...
Do you really expect that to happen? I mean, that it could be blown out of the water and she'll give up on it? This is Theresa May.
Knowing Theresa May, I would bet against it. But I think that if you're getting up in the high hundreds, there will be people in number 10 saying, really? There is a point at which you need some credibility here, and if you're losing by high hundreds, how do you expect ever to get this?
But I was just talking to Claire Perry, the business minister, and she was talking about other attempts, plural, that,
Yes.
that she will go back to
Yes,
the EU.
absolutely,
something
and
you're
there's a
familiar
lot
with,
of talk
Craig
amongst-
Oliver, from those negotiations with Angela Merkel, the hope that perhaps something more
There is
might
a lot of
emerge.
talk amongst MPs today that is what's going to be Plan B. Plan B is a bit more of the same. It's Plan A+. I think it really sounds hopelessly
It's a fantasy.
optimistic. I thought it was very interesting towards the end of her speech to the Commons there, the extent to which she was appealing to listeners at home, people listening to that speech, voters, rather than to fellow MPs, talking about the role of politicians and elected MPs actually fulfilling their duty and their role as servants of the people, if you like. And perhaps this feeds in some way to why the Tories are still, despite all this mayhem, significantly ahead in the polls.
Seemed very, John Craig, I mean, it seemed authentic, it seemed from the heart. I mean, you know, we know that Theresa May takes that public service element of the job so seriously and talking about the national interest.
Yes, and I'm told that her speech to her Conservative MPs last night was quite emotional as well, talking about her long career in politics, even before she was a Member of Parliament. She was a member of Merton Council. And that MP said actually that was one of her better speeches to what we normally call the 1922 committee. Last night, some of the previous ones not been so good. Yes, we're looking at... If you look at the,
keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, the whips come up before the table. On the right-hand side of our screen, it will be the government whips, and one of the whips will... announce the results, and we're expecting a pretty big victory for the government on this one, yes.
Both there, and the chamber more or less full.
It is full. I mean, people who are inside the chamber are saying that it's the most full they've ever seen it. I mean, the press gallery will be packed now.
You got some interesting information about the Strangers Gallery.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at a few tweets. Sally Burko's in the gallery. She who, of course, had the controversial sticker on her car. Last time I looked, it wasn't there. I couldn't see it. Seb Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's son. Philip May, as you might expect. Sadiq Khan's there as well. One tweeter said he was giving Labour MPs a bit of a look, the evil eye, perhaps. But just to explain to people, the view of the Commons we're looking at now is from underneath the public gallery. And at the far end behind the speaker, above that clock you can just see, that's the press gallery. And either side, above the Labour backbenches on the right of our screen and the Tory backbenches on the left of our screen, there are some galleries at the side. And they will be full, they're like overflow galleries, and they will be full of MPs, probably a lot of peers in there. There's a peers gallery as well on the right-hand side looking at the screen. But you see how many MPs are standing there at what's called the bar of the House. And
as Theresa May said in her summing up there, that this is the most important vote that they will have in their lifetimes. Not this one, though. This is an amendment to the withdrawal agreement. That's going to come next. And we should just explain to those of you just joining us. This is an amendment giving the UK the power to end the so-called Northern Irish backstop. It's been so contentious throughout the negotiations of this withdrawal agreement. So many people implacably opposed to it, particularly on the Conservative side and indeed amongst the Democratic Unionist Party, who are keeping the Conservatives in government. I'm just keeping an eye on whether we're going to get a result on this. We are expecting it not to pass. We'd like to see by how many, as the whips, the people who count up the votes, lining up there, the tellers, right in front of the speaker. Let's hear.
Order.
The ayes to the right were 24. The noes to the left were 600.
The ayes to the right, 24. The noes to the left, 600. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. Thank you.
Well, let's put the numbers up for you if we can. 600 against 24, a vast majority. And if
a rare occasion there where you've got the two big parties voting the same way.
Yeah, we should say against the
against that, yeah. And 24. I mean, I said it was the right wingers, if you like, and the hardline Brexiteers, and not many more.
576 majority. Even if we'll just listen to what the Speaker's ruling is now.
This is the big vote now.
So the moment of truth arrives. A rather damp squib as hors d'oeuvre there in terms of that amendment. Thumpingly defeated. This is the one that matters. This is voting on Theresa May's Brexit deal. 2 years in the negotiation. It's the best deal, the only deal around, the Prime Minister said, as she ended this 5 days of debate. Let's get a sense of the occasion. Our editor-at-large, Adam Bolton, is in Downing Street. I was going to say it's all to play for, Adam, but it's all about the numbers here, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, that majority of 576 defeating that amendment from John Barron, I mean, that may be a record already this evening. I'm not quite sure about that. Of course, I think that division took about 20 minutes, and that's because obviously 600 people went through one division lobby, so the actual queues to register their votes would have been even longer than usual. And one MP has already tweeted saying that John Barron was coming in for quite a lot of abuse from his colleagues for forcing them to go through the division lobbies. He did have the opportunity not to put his motion to a full vote, but he decided not to do that. But this is the big one now. And just from the shouting at the beginning, it was quite clear that those saying yes in support of the government's bill were not as loud or as prolonged as those shouting no. So I think all the indications are that this probably will be a slightly closer vote. So it should be a little bit quicker. It should take around about 15 minutes, but it does look as if the government is heading towards the defeat. And I think that will raise one of the questions tonight, not what Mrs May is going to say, because we're pretty sure that she's going to say she's going to bring back a version of this after further discussions with Brussels tonight.
Tellers for the ayes, Wendy Morton and Ian Stewart. Tellers for the noes, Vicky Foxcroft and Nick Smith.
Tellers for the ayes, Wendy Morton and Ian Stewart are on the right of your screen as they approach the Speaker's chair. If they are, they will have won for the government, and a lot of people are not expecting that. But, you know, as I was saying, really the key question now is what the Leader of the Opposition is going to do. Is Mr Corbyn tonight going to call for a vote of no confidence, in which case that would take place tomorrow? His tendency, his preference has been to speed things up where necessary, and of course Wednesday is already a busy day for him because he has to appear at Prime Minister's questions. Or will he wait until tomorrow? So that, I think, is probably the biggest question, along with the bigger one of just how many MPs are going to oppose the government in this key vote, the so-called meaningful vote won by Gina Miller and colleagues in the Supreme Court.
OK, Adam, thank you very much indeed. Well, those green benches in the House of Commons fairly empty right now because the vast majority of MPs still voting for or against Theresa May's Brexit deal. Let's go to the heart of Parliament now. Our Deputy Political Editor, Beth Rigby, is in a central lobby there. And what an atmosphere it must be. As Theresa May was saying in her speech, summing up of these 5 days of debate, the most important moment in any MP's of their careers.
Yeah. And she went on, didn't she? Said that it was a decision that will define our country for decades to come. Look, it is electric down here. Look, I've got Matt Hancock. Matt Hancock, do you want to come on? He doesn't want to talk yet. He might talk to me after the vote, the health secretary. And like I say, my heart's pounding. It's really busy down here because actually, in 15 minutes or so, we're going to find out whether Theresa May will go down in history as the Prime Minister who faced or saw the biggest defeat in over a century. There's only been 3 occasions in the past 100 years in which a Prime Minister has faced a defeat or seen a defeat of over 100 votes, and they were all during the 1920s, Ramsay MacDonald's minority Labour government. And just to put it into context as to what we are expecting, our own analysis has suggested potentially a defeat by over 200 votes. And a senior minister said to me earlier today, who's been very closely involved with the debates and the discussions, that he thought 150 to 200 could be where that lands, and that will be pretty sensational. It will be an enormous moment, and as Adam was saying, we'll then be seeing whether or not Jeremy Corbyn decides to lay that vote of no confidence on Theresa May's government, whether he decides to table that tonight, whether we have that tomorrow. The other thing that's happening, Dermot, is that people are manoeuvring. So I've just been told to watch what the second referendum lot do. I'm told that overnight a number of Labour MPs are going to come out and say May's deal is dead, we're now pivoting to a second referendum. I think they're going to make that announcement tomorrow morning and try and make some fanfare of that, because they're trying to get momentum now. And then the ERGers, what are they going to do? Well, watch what happens after that vote. I'm told that they're going to be coming out here and coming onto our cameras to make the case of May's deal is dead, let's go for a no-deal Brexit. And also the Norway lot, those who want a softer version of Brexit, I'm sure they've got some plans too. So everyone manoeuvring in expectation that Theresa May's deal will fall. We'll be seeing what she will do. Will she come back tonight? Will she come back tomorrow? But be in no doubt, this is going to be a huge parliamentary moment, the most significant in decades.
OK, Beth, thank you very much indeed for the inside intelligence there. Well, before the manoeuvring starts, we're going to get the results of this vote. Our political editor, Faisal Islam, is here with me. Still a way to go, I would suspect, given the number of empty green benches are still there, the voting still taking place. So, Faisal Islam, the numbers first of all. Has there been some expectation management going on here with these sense of huge vote against Theresa May? Can she say she's done better than expected if it's 150 or something?
Well, if these were figures being spun by Number 10, then that would be the case. But simply speaking, we, number of other media organisations, have simply asked MPs, and not just asked them before Christmas when we originally thought this was going to happen. We've asked them in the past week or so. So we can only report what they have told us. It's possible that there'll be a shift. Those people who say, I'm not going to support the government, maybe they'll abstain. But I think the context here, this is that if it's triple figures, it's a historically terrible number, as Beth was saying. If it's anything like 200, it's kind of completely unthinkable for a Prime Minister on any type of legislation, let alone the legislation for which is the basic purpose of their government to deliver. It is an unthinkable number, over 200. So let's just see. It's, of course, in the blind secret voting of the confidence votes, it was fairly clear that a number of Tory MPs would not tell us the truth. But all of the voting lists will be published, so we'll know who's voted which way. The sorts of traffic that we've seen over the past couple of days has been a tiny trickle towards the May deal on the Tory side. But some the other way too.
OK.
And some Labour numbers will be important. And I think what we're getting now is people already trying to play the aftermath of this. This is really important. The Prime Minister has got to try and own this moment in some way and give some sense of momentum.
Let's move it on step by step. So she loses big. She'll come back and make some kind of statement to the House of Commons tonight. And we're also hearing it had already been intimated that the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker is staying in Brussels. The European Parliament is in Strasbourg at the moment. He was due to an event there, but he's going to Brussels. He's going to make some kind of statement this evening. She's going to have another go, isn't she? And she's going to have another go with the European Union. And do you think she'll have another go with this vote?
I think that's her plan. I think if there is some sort of meeting arranged or emergency dash to Brussels, I don't think this is not it happening. If that does happen, I do wonder. I do expect Jeremy Corbyn to table a no-confidence vote tonight. I think that is the plan. Maybe, just maybe, if she announces that there's another leg of some sort of negotiation, does he put that off? Do they calculate that they've got a better chance? To be honest, an opposition would choose not to table a motion of no confidence if she is to lose by 150 to 200 would be an extraordinary act in itself. And I think only half-jokingly, a cabinet source talking to me today suggested, well, to be honest, maybe we just give the SNP some time to get on with it and embarrass the opposition into having a no confidence vote, given that it's going to happen at some point anyway. I heard from another senior MP telling me that there's a mood amongst Conservatives. This is somebody appointed to a position by the Prime Minister telling me that he felt that there was a mood, again, that this would be a resigning matter for the Prime Minister if she failed again. So it may be that those that are sceptical about the Prime Minister's leadership are willing to give her one more chance, having gone back to Europe. But there is talk about her leadership, as you'd expect, if the loss does reach triple figures. But I think her plan is to plough on, see what she can get out. I know that Europe held some stuff back because they simply didn't expect it to make any difference.
Well, they said, didn't they? They said before this vote that it would be banked and then that more would be required.
Yeah,
but whatever they've held back probably won't be.
Well, there's two different schools of thought that are obviously diametrically opposite. One school of thought is if she loses by 150 to 200, she then shows the Europeans that they've really got to change their approach. But I think there's another more relevant school of thought, which is the EU may well think, well, there is nothing plausible that we can offer that can shift 100 votes in the House of Commons. And I think one point is really important to note here, which is that, yes, the backstop is the most offensive to those rebels, part of this, and the most cited. But actually, there's a bunch of other aspects to this withdrawal deal. No, not just Remainers. On the Brexit side, there's the so-called divorce bill. There's the rule-taking aspect. There's the ECJ having some sort of continuing role in the UK. All of these things have been cited as reasons. So it isn't just, even if you could magically solve the backstop, that issue.
OK, well, let's look at other ways she might go. If she doesn't plough on with this, could she try something radical? Could she say, I am ruling out no deal?
So another thing I heard from a cabinet source today was the notion that she should see where the wind is blowing. She should see that that wind is blowing towards a more collegiate, consensual solution to this problem, and don't let it be forced upon you by shenanigans from Letwin Bowles and the Speaker.
So head off this kind of backbench revolt on both sides.
Do the indicative votes. So that's from some cabinet ministers. Wasn't discussed widely at Cabinet this morning. So, you would think that a situation like this, a potential triple-figure vote against your landmark deal that you've put together over a year and a half, you would think that a politician with guile would think, let's move quickly, let's own this moment, let's shift gear in some direction. Some of her allies are saying, ultimately, you need to get tough with one. Her problem is she has a coalition of the uncompromising that is incoherent.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Both can't be right.
But she can't go back to her cabinet, can she, and sit them round the table and say, let's thrash this out. They're hopelessly divided as well. Whichever way she goes, she's going to get resignations, isn't she?
So you reach out to Labour and go a bit softer, customs union, you will get cabinet resignations and potentially more Conservatives finding that too close a relationship with the EU, too restrictive in future foreign trade deals. But the question tonight is it not just about tactics and rhetoric? Is her fundamental strategy of trying to find a majority in this Parliament that is made up of Conservatives plus DUP plus some Labour rebels, is it fundamentally wrong? Is it fundamentally not going to lead to the majority? Let me put it like this, did the general election of 2017, she hit the iceberg at that point, and we're just now getting to the point where the captain realises that the boat is sinking?
We might be getting the point where the captain sights the iceberg right in front of her.
I don't think we're, to drag the Titanic reference out too much, I don't think we're at the point where it splits in two and goes to the bottom. We're at the point where they've stopped.
And the deck chairs
the violin's still playing.
Yeah. But let's explain to people what is happening right now. Now the chamber of the House of Commons filled right back up. The vast majority of MPs have voted in this crucial vote on Theresa May's Brexit deal, the withdrawal agreements that will lead, as Theresa May says, to an orderly exit from the European Union on March the 29th this year, agreeing to pay the European Union about £39 billion, going into a transition period when the UK will stay in total alignment with the European Union while the future trade arrangement is thrashed out.
OK, Mike, I just got a bit of
underlying
breaking
all
news.
that, the backstop.
Just a bit of breaking news. I understand that Tom Pursglove has resigned as a PPS.
Explain that.
Sorry, as a vice chair. Forgive me,
right,
a vice
okay.
chair. He was a former PPS. He's a vice chair of the Conservative Party. I understand Tom Pursglove, who was a art.
We've got the result.
Order.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
To the right, 202.
There we have it. The withdrawal agreement's defeated by a majority of 230. 202 voting for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement, 432 MPs saying no to Theresa May. Faisal Islam, our political editor, and that's right at the top end of expectations. That's a point of order.
A horrific result. Let's hear from the Prime Minister.
It is clear that the House does not support this deal, but tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how or even if it intends to honour the decision the British people took in a referendum Parliament decided to hold. And people, particularly EU citizens who've made their home here, and UK citizens living in the EU, deserve clarity on these questions as soon as possible.
Order, order. There's no good people shouting. There will be an opportunity for other points of order, but the Prime Minister must and will be heard. The Prime Minister.
Those whose jobs rely on our trade with the EU need that clarity. So, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to set out briefly how the government intends to proceed. First, we need to confirm whether this government still enjoys the confidence of the House. I believe that it does, but given the scale and importance of tonight's vote, it's right that others have the chance to test that question if they wish to do so. I can therefore confirm that if the official opposition table a confidence motion this evening, in the form required by the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, the government will make time to debate that motion tomorrow. And if, as happened before Christmas, the official opposition declined to do so, we will, on this occasion, consider making time tomorrow to debate any motion in the form required from the other opposition parties, should they put one forward. Second, if the House confirms its confidence in this government, I will then hold meetings with my colleagues, our confidence and supply partner, the DUP, and senior parliamentarians from across the House to identify what would be required to secure the backing of the House. The government will approach these meetings in a constructive spirit, but given the urgent need to make progress, we must focus on ideas that are genuinely negotiable and have sufficient support in this House. Third, if these meetings yield such ideas, the government will then explore them with the European Union. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by offering two reassurances. The first is to those who fear that the government's strategy is to run down the clock to the 29th of March. That is not our strategy. I've always believed that the best way forward is to leave in an orderly way with a good deal, and have devoted much of the last 2 years negotiating such a deal. As you confirmed, Mr. Speaker, the amendment to the business motion tabled last week by my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Beaconsfield, is not legally binding, but the government respects the will of the House. We will therefore make a statement about the way forward and table an amendable motion by Monday. The second reassurance is to the British people who voted to leave the European Union in the referendum 2.5 years ago. I became Prime Minister immediately after that referendum. I believe it's my duty to deliver on their instruction, and I intend to do so. Every day that passes without this issue being resolved means more uncertainty, more bitterness and more rancour. The government has heard what the House has said tonight, but I ask members on all sides of the House to listen to the British people who want this issue settled and to work with the government to do just that.
I will come to other colleagues, but first of all, point of order, the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The result of tonight's vote is the greatest defeat for a government since the 1920s in this House. This is a catastrophic defeat for this government. After 2 years of failed negotiations, the House of Commons has delivered its verdict on her Brexit deal, and that verdict is absolutely decisive. I hear the words of the Prime Minister, but actions of her government of the past 2 years speak equally clearly. She is only attempting to reach out now to try to keep her failed process and deal alive after it's been so roundly rejected by Parliament on behalf of the people of this country. Labour has laid out our priorities consistently. No deal must be taken off the table. A permanent customs union must be secured and people's rights and protections must be guaranteed so they do not fall behind. At every turn, the Prime Minister has closed the door on dialogue. Businesses begged her to negotiate a comprehensive customs union. Trade union leaders pressed her for the same thing. They were ignored. In the last 2 years, she's only had one priority: the Conservative Party. Her governing principle of delay and denial has reached the end of the line. She cannot seriously believe that after 2 years of failure, she is capable of negotiating a good deal for the people of this country. The most important issue facing us is that the government has lost the confidence of this House and this country. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, inform you I have now tabled a motion of no confidence in this government. And I'm pleased that motion will be debated tomorrow, so this House can give its verdict on the sheer incompetence of this government and pass that motion of no confidence in the government.
First of all, just come to the leader. I will come to the right honourable gentleman, of course, but a point of order, the Leader of the House.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to make a short business statement regarding the business for tomorrow and the remainder of this week.
I'm extraordinarily grateful to the right honourable lady, and I accept that she can't be psychic as to what I'm thinking, and I can't be psychic as to what she's thinking. I think the smooth and orderly way to proceed with this matter is to deal with points of order first, and then to come to the right honourable lady's statement, which would be entirely proper and doubtless helpful to the House. Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, we should be aware of the situation that we're in. The clock is ticking. We have got very little time to resolve this. The fact that it has taken us so long to get to this point.
The leader of the Scottish National Party in the House of Commons makes some points there in Blackford. What's a few minutes of drama? 5 to 10 minutes ago, the vote on the meaningful vote approving the withdrawal agreement was, as you can see at the right of your screen, thumpingly defeated by 432 votes to 202, a majority of 230 against the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister stood up and said that she was going to countenance a vote of confidence in the government, and she also said if Labour weren't going to table it, she'd listen to the SNP if they wanted to do that. But Jeremy Corbyn took up the gauntlet instantly. He stood up, slammed into the Prime Minister, and has tabled that motion of no confidence. The government saying that it will be debated and voted on tomorrow. Our political editor, Faisal Islam, is here with me. He's moving fast, Faisal.
Yes, and obviously we're going to get the vote lists, and it's pretty clear that there's been some more resignations. I mentioned Tom Purscliffe, Vice Chair of the Conservative Party, who resigned to vote against this deal, and that is a thumping defeat, 230 majority. We were being quite cautious beforehand. It's exactly in line with what we were told by MPs. We couldn't quite believe that the defeat would be that big because, I mean, it's worth just putting it in context. Ramsay MacDonald, 166 defeat. He didn't even run
1924.
1924 didn't even run the biggest party in the Commons at that point on an issue of such importance. I mean, by my calculations, she must have got over 100 Tory MPs voting against this, rebelling, which is lots of people voting against the Conservatives for the first time in their life. Now, the stories of those individual rebels will be fascinating too. But I think what you've seen now is the optics of a Prime Minister that wants to try to project that she's still in charge. So she tried to say, well, of course, you know, I mean, I'm going to make some time for a confidence measure to try and get in there before Jeremy Corbyn. You've seen there the Leader of the Commons trying to sort of say, yes, we're in charge here. We're going to set the timetable now for this confidence vote. OK? You know, this is all about saying we are still in charge, having gone down to the worst defeat a governing party has gone down to.
So she said, I mean, other interesting...
In modern history, in like universal suffrage and things like that.
Other things she said there in her brief statement was running down the clock, not our strategy, kind of ruling out...
Well, this is what we thought was going to happen 5 weeks ago. So all that has been achieved by that delay has been that the tight timetable that could leave us with a no-deal WTO Brexit, which the vast majority of government ministers think would be extremely difficult at the very least and disastrous at the very worst, has run down by, you know, we've lobbed
the clock's already run down.
No, I mean, so she didn't achieve anything, and she certainly didn't achieve any extra votes. There was, frankly, insane in the context briefing just before Christmas that she was going to achieve changes and then achieve changes that would lead her to win this deal. She's lost it by 230 votes.
And also said that she will give more on the so-called Plan B on Monday. Now, presumably she's going to talk to the European Union. I just got a tweet here from Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, and this is what Donald Tusk has had to say. If a deal is impossible and no one wants no deal, then who will finally have the courage to say what the only positive solution is?
Yes, and so that is the key. And the Prime Minister's opened her initial remarks with that this is not a vote that has given us a way forward. It's just, for the minute, temporarily blocked her way forward. That's how she sees this. I've got a longer quote here from a spokesperson from the European Council, and it ends with this. We will continue the EU's process of ratification of the agreement reached with the UK government. This agreement is and remains the best and only way to ensure an orderly withdrawal. The risk of a disorderly exit has increased with this vote. So we're already getting responses from the business community, we're getting responses from others saying that this is bad news in terms of the risks of a no deal. I'm sure we'll talk to our economics and business correspondents about what's happened to sterling. Sterling already down a bit today. How does she win? So the question now is there any plausible change that she could win from the Europeans
to turn that around?
To turn those numbers around. So she will, let's do the maths, she'd have to turn around 116 MPs would have to change their mind. What is it? What is the realm of possibility that could change the mind of 116 MPs? And I can't see it. Instead, it's about tactics. You know, one of her cabinet allies, key loyal allies, saying she's got to do something drastic. She's got to. The only way she does this, in a way, is to break the coalition of the uncompromising, which is the hardline Remainers and the hardline Brexiters. Maybe if you can kill off once and for all one of those options, then the other lot come into line. Do you do that? Do you threaten the Brexiters with a referendum on her deal? But then you split the Conservative Party. But then how do you get it through Parliament otherwise? Even if you have a general election, how do you, it doesn't change, does it change the fundamental equation here? I mean,
Everything is up in the air.
It's a maze in a fog.
Let's get the thoughts of our editor at large, Adam Bolton. He's in Downing Street, and let's just reflect, Adam, first of all, on the scale of this defeat for Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. It's right in line, in actual fact, with Sky News's projections, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's worst case. And I think we did see the tactics of the government's opponents in making sure that the vote was concentrated directly on the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. Now, I think what was probably bad news for Mrs May is that twice in the closing speech she gave and then in the reaction she gave, having lost the vote, she talked about cooperation and looking for solutions with other parties and other MPs. And both times there was giggles and sniggering. from MPs. So that just shows that her ability, if you like, the goodwill towards her, people who do see her as a potential honest broker, certainly isn't there at the moment. And we also know, of course, as Vernon Bogdanor was saying earlier on, that her cabinet is divided as well as to which way to move and in which direction concessions should be made. So she's got a third of her party who have gone against her. More than a third of her MPs have decided to rebel tonight, with that figure at over 100. I heard Faisal saying 116. I don't know if that's absolutely confirmed yet. It'd be interesting to know. But certainly 1 MP in 3 now doesn't support not just the Prime Minister, but doesn't support the government on Brexit. And that's a very, very difficult position to be in. Incidentally, had she won tonight, it wouldn't necessarily have been all plain sailing, because the DUP told me on Sky News that if she had won the withdrawal agreement tonight, they would have voted against her in a confidence motion because they don't accept the withdrawal deal. At least tomorrow in the vote, she must assume that she's going to get the support of the DUP.
OK, Adam, thank you very much indeed. Just going to go to Beth Rigby in a moment or two in Parliament's Central Lobby. Faisal's just our political editor. You just got some numbers on the number of Tory rebels.
118 Conservative rebels
voted against the Prime Minister.
Voted against the Prime Minister, a coalition of the hard Brexiters and the hard Remainers and others, former ministers. He's a terrible list of names here. 118, almost exactly the same number as voted against her in the confidence vote.
The leadership challenge.
But how do you turn those? We've also got a quick note from Jean-Claude Juncker that's just worth saying. I take note with regret of the outcome of the vote in the House of Commons this evening. I urge the UK to clarify its intentions as soon as possible. Time is almost up. #Brexit.
OK, fast moving. Let's go to Beth Rigby in Central Lobby in Parliament tonight. We want to hear from as many MPs as possible. And Beth's got some with her. How did they vote, Beth?
Hi, Dermot. I have Lisa Nandy with me, MP for Wigan, a Labour MP who voted against Theresa May. Lisa, thanks for joining us. She lost by 230 votes. Can you believe that?
I can believe it, because we've had 2.5 years of the Prime Minister refusing to reach out across Parliament, refusing to listen to large sections of the public who hold differing views from the hardliners in her party on Brexit, and this is the result. Even right up to the wire in the chamber, just a few minutes ago, just before she was about to face this massive defeat, she was still taking that same belligerent tone, not listening, refusing to countenance that there could be any way but her way, and that is frankly why we've ended up here. None of us should be pleased about this. This is really, really worrying stuff. We've got just a matter of weeks to go until we leave the EU, potentially with no deal, with no transition period, with major implications for manufacturing jobs in constituencies like mine. And whatever happens tomorrow, I'll be voting that I have no confidence in this government, but whatever happens tomorrow, this has to mark the start of a complete change of approach, not just from the government, but from Parliament as a whole.
And just on that, Lisa, on the change of approach, I imagine what's going to happen now is various different factions in Parliament are now going to really do the hard sell on their vision of Brexit, given that 230 MPs defeated May on hers. Quite something. I'm still astonished by that result. What do you think should happen next?
Well, what we can't have is yet more of what we've had for 2.5 years. It's been grandstanding, entrenched positions. Just today in the chamber, despite the death threats against one of my colleagues, the harassment that we saw outside Parliament, the murder of one of my colleagues a few years ago, we've still got MPs calling one another traitor and screaming betrayal in the chamber. We're all going to have to step out of our comfort zones and start to listen and to compromise and find a way forward for this country. It is possible to do this. In other countries, they've used citizens' assemblies to break the deadlock. It is possible for us to do it, but we can't keep dividing Parliament and we can't keep dividing the public, or we will get the same result over and over again.
I mean, ultimately, Lisa, you are someone that wants to leave. Chuka, you are not. You are a second referendum on Team Second Ref. What do you think of this result and the implications?
Well, it's not surprising because it was a withdrawal agreement and a political declaration that didn't really please any community. My community voted very strongly to remain. I think Lisa's voted to leave. No one was happy with it, and Parliament is supposed to act as a check and balance on the executive, and it said no. So we've got to find a way through this. I suspect that it's going to be very difficult for us to reach a consensus on a way forward here, which is why it's important that we have as a backstop referring this back to the people. Now, I understand, there are lots of colleagues who have reservations about going to a people's vote. I don't think it's, having another referendum is not something loads of people welcome with relish. But if we want to stop ourselves from, falling off the cliff and leaving without a deal, we will need to get an extension to the Article 50 process. And the EU institutions are clear that they're not just going to grant us more time for negotiation, but they will give us more time for a democratic vote. So it is a way for us to avoid no deal. But I accept that, we're going to have to persuade colleagues here that that's the way forward. I think we can do that now that her deal is forward.
I was going to ask you that. Your People's Vote campaign, I'm told that overnight a number of Labour MPs are going to come out for your campaign now that her deal looks as dead as a dodo. How many people are you expecting to come over to your team?
Well, I wouldn't want to put a figure on it, and
Why not?
Well, because ultimately it's not for me to announce what colleagues are going to do. This is a very individual, decision, and you take into account very strongly what your community wants. But I've spoken to lots of colleagues privately who have said that they can see, particularly if we're talking about avoiding no deal, that this is a viable way forward.
OK, and just finally, in terms of Jeremy Corbyn and the no confidence vote, which is now tabled tomorrow, the DUP, quite clear to me actually earlier today, Sammy Wilson on Sky News said that they would vote with the government. Looks quite hard, given that, for Labour to win that no confidence vote. Now, the policy is to look at all other options. I know which option you'd like him to pivot to. Lisa, what do you think Jeremy Corbyn should do in terms of next moves?
Well, I think that he should respect the decision that he and Labour made a couple of years ago and accept the referendum result. We had a people's vote. I campaigned heavily for Remain during that referendum, and we lost it. I think that now we face a trade-off as a country between a series of hard democratic choices and the need to protect our democracy, and a series of hard economic choices and the need to protect our economy. And I think what we should be doing in the Labour Party, and all MPs across the House should be doing now, is laying aside our entrenched positions and trying to find a way through that protects both as best as we can.
Can I just ask you, Lisa, would you back a kind of Norway-style option? I know that's what Lucy Powell, one of your colleagues, and other Labour MPs are looking at. Is that something you could live with or would support?
I think we need a bespoke deal for the UK. I've always thought where we would end up if we respected the result of the referendum would be a sort of EEA plus customs union model. I think there would be support in Parliament for that, and I think there would be broad support in the country as well. One of the things that Stella Creasy and I will be proposing on Monday in the Chamber is that the government, alongside this parliamentary process, also establishes a citizens' assembly so that we take away this argument about the will of the people, which we've been having for 2.5 years, and allow the public to have some meaningful engagement in instructing politicians about what comes next.
OK, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave it there. So, Dermot, what we do have are MPs convinced that they don't like May's deal, but you just saw that there. They're not really united on what should come next. Back to you.
OK, Beth, many, many thanks for that. It's just after 8 o'clock. You're watching Sky News, a special programme on dramatic events this evening in the House of Commons, where the House have voted by a thumping majority to defeat Theresa May's withdrawal agreement from the European Union. Let me give you the numbers, and they're right in line with the high end of expectations. 202 MPs voted for the deal, 403 voted against. It was a majority of 230 against that deal. 118 Tories voted against the government, so we hear 432, I should say, voted against the deal, 202 for it. John Craig, our chief political correspondent, is here with me, and those numbers are just so stark for the Prime Minister. How could she possibly turn that round?
We've got the official breakdown now, and it just shows the enormity of the task facing her if and when she does bring this deal back. Now, the breakdown of the ayes, 202, Conservative was 196 Conservatives voting with the Prime Minister. 3 Labour MPs, we believe those were Frank Field, who I think I'm right in saying said during the debate he was going to, Kate Hoey and I think John Mann, Eurosceptics. 3 independents, not quite sure who they are, but there's quite a few independents in the Commons now for all sorts of reasons. The noes, the 432, 248 Labour MPs, that's most Labour MPs, all 35 Scottish National Party MPs, 5 independents voting with the noes, 118 Conservatives, as you said, the 10 DUP, 4 Plaid Cymru, and 11 Liberal Democrats and the 1 Green Party.
OK, John,
MP.
John, I mean, it's just been such a fast-moving evening. I mean, that 5 minutes, you got the result of the vote, then the Prime Minister stood up and said she will accept, she will make time tomorrow for a debate on a vote of confidence in the government. She didn't say who was going to move it. Then we heard from the Leader of the Opposition. He stood up and said, we're going to challenge you.
But clearly, I mean, she was daring Mr Corbyn to do it. Clearly, she believes she'll win tomorrow's vote. And we've had confirmation in the last few minutes that the DUP, their 10 MPs, will vote with the government. So she should win tomorrow, barring a mutiny by some of her own backbenchers. Just to confirm, we saw Andrea Leadsom attempting to make a business statement, and then she did. She's what's going to happen? It'll be Prime Minister's questions as usual. Then it'll be the debate. The vote tomorrow, 7 p.m.
Again.
Same again.
Okay.
So we'll be back here at 7 o'clock tomorrow, no doubt.
Well, let's get reaction to those numbers. Got an auspicious panel here. I'm joined by the former Downing Street Director of Communications, Sir Craig Oliver, political journalist and commentator Isabel Oakeshott, and constitutional expert Professor Vernon Bogdanor. And Professor Bogdanor, first of all, we've very clearly found out what MPs are against. But what a pickle. What are they for?
Absolutely. And perhaps Theresa May's best tactic now is to flush out the opponents of the deal as to what they want, to have a vote on whether they want a no-deal Brexit. Presumably Parliament would vote against that. To have a vote on a second referendum. Presumably at the moment there'd be a majority against that. A vote on Norway, a vote on the customs union, a vote on whether they want a hard border in Northern Ireland, which presumably they don't, and then ask, what is the alternative to my deal? I would have thought that would be her best tactic, to take command of the process.
Well, let's get a sense. We're going to hold our thoughts in the studio. We want to get a sense of what may be coming from the heart of the Cabinet. No doubt plenty of meetings, emergency meetings taking place amongst them. I want to join my colleague, Beth Rigby. She's in Parliament's Central Lobby and has the Health Secretary with her. Beth.
Hi, Dermot. Yes, I do. I have Matt Hancock here, the Health Secretary, who is doing the media round after that rather astonishing defeat. Mr Hancock, thank you for joining us on Sky News. I'm pretty astonished that she's lost by that amount. Are you?
Well, it was pretty clear that this debate wasn't going the government's way and has been for some time. If you listen to the debate, there were an awful lot of opinions expressed and clearly most of them against the deal. Now, I believe that the deal is in the national interest and voted for it with head and heart, but clearly we're going to have to discuss the way forward with others in Parliament, both on our own backbenches, also in the Labour Party and in the other parties and with the DUP as well, to find a way forward that the Commons will support.
Amber Rudd has in Cabinet, and you'll know because you're there, talked about this idea of a cross-party consensus. Are you now saying that Theresa May has to give up on her own backbenchers and look for cross-party consensus to try and forge a deal rather than leaving with no deal? Is that where we're now at, just to be clear?
I'm not saying that, because there's backbenchers on the Conservative side who will have a very important voice in the discussions over the next few days to find out what the Commons will support. The thing is that we discovered last week that there is no majority in the Commons for no deal. The question is how we find a majority in favour of a deal. Now, no deal remains the option that is where we get to through the legislation, through the law of the land, if there isn't a deal that is supported, if that makes sense. And therefore, the task, firstly, is to win the confidence vote tomorrow. I strongly believe that the Commons has confidence in the Prime Minister. And then the task is to find a potentially negotiable set of proposals that the Commons will support.
Mr Hancock, 1 in 3 Conservative MPs voted against their own Prime Minister, voted against their own government policy. Isn't it just time for Mrs May to pack up and leave number 10?
No, certainly not. I think that would be a mistake. She has negotiated this deal, but she's also the best place to find the deal that the Commons will support. That's the task that we have ahead of us.
So we had thought that she would go back to Brussels, try and do more negotiation around her version of Brexit. Are you now saying that, given the scale of that defeat, she should bin that idea, give up on her deal, and try and find something new? Is that where we are now as a government, or you are as a government?
Well, I'm not going to prejudge these discussions, cross-party discussions, discussions with our own backbenchers, importantly discussions with the DUP. I'm not going to prejudge those by making a comment on any particular way forward, because we need to listen. The Prime Minister clearly said that she now wants to listen to the Commons, to the many disparate voices that were aired during the debate. Actually, a high quality of debate in terms of the way people spoke and the different ideas that were put forward. And she's going to now have that discussion with the Commons. The key is that, as we've made clear for so long, no deal is not a good option. A second referendum would be profoundly divisive. I fully expect and hope that the Commons will support the Prime Minister in a confidence motion tomorrow, and that leaves the answer of finding a deal that the Commons will support, taking that to the EU and negotiating on that.
What could that deal look like? Are you now pivoting to a kind of Norway-style version of Brexit? I know that's something your colleagues have been talking about. Is that where you think it could land?
Well, my colleagues have talked about a lot of different alternatives, if I may say so. And the point about listening is I'm not going to prejudge that. The Prime Minister is going to listen to senior parliamentarians on all sides and try to find a way forward that can command their support.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr Hancock. So there you have it, Dermot. It looks like Theresa May dashing back to Brussels to keep this deal alive, maybe fading. Mr Hancock suggesting there that now is time to try and build a cross-party consensus to get some version of Brexit through the House of Commons. Back to you.
OK, Beth, many thanks for that. Well, if she does and when she does go back to Brussels, we already know the reaction, part of the reaction she's going to get via Twitter. We've heard from the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk. He said, and this was an immediate reaction to that vote, he said if a deal is impossible and no one wants no deal, as the Prime Minister more or less said, then who will finally have the courage to say what the only positive solution is? He didn't mention what he thinks it is. And then the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, said, I take note with regret of the outcome of the vote in the House of Commons this evening. I urge the UK to clarify its intentions as soon as possible. Time is almost up, quite ominously. Well, that was how MPs voted in the House of Commons, and of course all of them said they were trying to divine what the will of the people was. Well, let's see how people who have been outside, they've been outside all day and indeed for many weeks now, outside the House of Commons, both Leavers and Remainers. Our correspondent David Bowden is with them. David.
Yeah, and I think both sides happy, but for entirely different reasons. Neither of them particularly like the deal. You've missed all the standoff, really. It was all very good-natured, but there was lots of singing. You can probably see the police just marshalling the pro-Brexiteers who were quite noisy earlier on, saying we've got a better flag than you. And if we just pan round to the left, Martin, you'll see that the pro-EU mob, the Remainers, are around here. They're quite joyous as well. I think nobody was surprised by the result. Everybody surprised, as we've heard, by the sheer scale of the defeat but nobody really satisfied. I mean, I was speaking to a Leave Means Leave regional coordinator a few minutes ago when he heard, and he said, look, you know, we just need to get to the 29th of March now, and let's just get out. WTO will do fine for us. But of course, the pro-Remain groups are saying now, look, let's just have another referendum. Let's put it to the people again. Let the people decide, because quite frankly, neither side believes that the people across the road from where I am now simply aren't doing their job and have made a complete horlicks of this. So I think everybody both happy and sad at the same time, if that makes any sense. Happy that this has been voted down, sad that no side appears to be making any progress whatsoever.
But as everyone keeps saying, they both can't be right. OK, David, thank you very much indeed, David Bowden. That side there has a comment there with some of the protesters, and that last point he made about a second referendum, a so-called people's vote. My colleague, our deputy political editor, Beth Rigby, is with someone, a former cabinet colleague, of course, of Theresa May, who supports that very option. Beth.
Yes, Dermot. I'm here with Justine Greening, the former Education Secretary, who is now a People's Voter, who is a rare convert on the Conservative benches. Justine, what do you make of this defeat?
Well, I think it's right at the top end of how bad it could be, in a sense, for this deal. I think the deal is absolutely dead. What we don't need now is any more procrastination. Had we had this vote before Christmas, we'd had the same result, but we'd have had an extra month for Parliament to now work with the government on how to get through this next chapter in Britain's history. So we now need no more procrastination. We need to find out whether there's a consensus in this House for anything. There are only a limited number of options. That does not need to take weeks. Frankly, you can have those votes in days, and we then need to get on and work out if there is gridlock in this place and there is no consensus, then it will have to go back to people. Personally, I don't want a general election. This is not about party politics. That's been one of the challenges for Parliament. I think then you have to go back for a referendum. But we need to test and see whether there's a consensus here first.
Just before we go on to next steps, can we just reflect for a minute on the scale of that defeat? I mean, it's 1 in 3 Conservative MPs voting against Theresa May. But as you were saying to me, if you put the government payroll back in, I mean, barely any backbenchers came out in support for her. I mean, where, seriously, does it leave her as a Prime Minister? I mean, she is completely defenestrated here, isn't she?
Well, I think the challenge is that there are broadly 3 routes ahead for Britain. You can have a hard Brexit. That's what I know many people who voted for Brexit wanted. You can do what the Prime Minister's done and come up with a soft Brexit option. I happen to think it's probably the best one she's come up with. Or, of course, you can keep the current deal. But it was very, very clear in many communities around our country that people just didn't think this middle-of-the-road option worked. They think you're in or you're out. And that's been reflected in by the vote
I know, but what I'm asking you is, do you really think she can carry on as Prime Minister when, I mean, 1 in 3 of her party have voted against a deal she's been working on for 2.5 years?
Well, I think she should have listened to people earlier. But the bottom line is, I think she has to now listen to Parliament, and I think we've had a leadership vote. I supported her for Prime Minister. I don't think that solves anything right now. I don't think a general election solves anything right now. I'll be certainly not supporting Labour's no confidence motion tomorrow. The last thing, frankly, Britain needs now is a Jeremy Corbyn government. What we do need to do is resolve Brexit, which is not about party politics, and that's why Parliament now needs the chance to test the different options. We can't find a consensus. We then have to go back to people, I'm afraid to say, and allow them to find a consensus for themselves.
You're a backer now of the second referendum option. Just a handful of Conservatives. I know it's a much bigger movement on the Labour benches. Are we going to see more Conservatives come out overnight and in the coming days for that option, do you think?
I'm sure all Conservative MPs will now be reflecting carefully on what the right route forward is. My view is going back to the people will be necessary. There's not going to be a consensus in here for anything, I don't believe. I happen to think it's the right thing to do. This is such a momentous choice for our country. It's right to give it back to people, and I think that Conservative MPs who share my view that the last thing we want is a general election, more upheaval, and risking a Jeremy Corbyn government, I think many of them will reflect that if you do have to go back to the public for a choice, then that should be a referendum.
Mr Hancock was just on, and he said that what the Prime Minister was going to do now was talk to opposition parties and MPs and see if she could find some form of consensus. Does that sound sensible to you?
Yes, of course, but we're on a timeline. We are leaving the European Union on the 29th of March. Because of the delay, we now have limited time for those discussions to happen. They can be rapid. Many MPs have already thought through what their views are on other options. We now just simply need the chance to test them, as we were able to test the will of the House for the Prime Minister's deal tonight.
As it stands, her deal voted down. The default option now is no deal. We're a career into no deal. We've got 73 days to go. How worried are you now about a no deal option, given that Mrs May has lost so emphatically tonight?
Well, I think it would be a concern if the House now expressed its will in relation to no deal, which I think would be equally emphatic that MPs representing people up and down the country do not want no deal. I think it would be deeply concerning if the Prime Minister and the government chose to press on regardless. We now need to see if we can find a consensus in Parliament. If that is there, we will follow that route. If it's not there, then we have to go back to people and find out what the path forward is that they want for themselves.
Great, thank you very much, Ms Green, for joining me. Well, there you have it, Dermot. I mean, parliamentarians, you can see, are clearly now determined to take over this process. And you heard Ms Green in there talking about a desire for the Prime Minister to rule out no deal. She's not alone. There's a number in her cabinet that want her to do the same. Anyway, I'll come back with more MPs when I get them. Back to you.
Plenty more there. OK, Beth, many thanks for that. And on that issue of a second vote, a second referendum, just got a tweet here from the SNP leader, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, saying a historic defeat for the Prime Minister has been obvious for months that it was coming. Enough time has been wasted. Time to stop Article 50 and put this issue back to the electorate, also saying, noting that Scotland voted to remain and it should not be dragged out against Scotland's will. Well, let's talk now more with my panel. Sir Craig Oliver, as former Director of Communications in Number 10, what would you advise Theresa May to be doing tonight after the scale of that defeat?
I'd advise her to do exactly what's happened, and I think in these circumstances you've got to look for who are the cabinet ministers that are going out representing Number 10. What were the two key words that Matt Hancock said over and over again? Cross-party. This is not a government that is prepared to go back with its deal. I think it's accepted that its deal isn't going to work. But what they do need to do is now loosen off and see if there is a solution in the House of Commons. Amber Rudd has suggested that view. Matt Hancock coming out tonight saying after what the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box, it's now clear that that is their tactic.
OK, but how does she go about that? She needs a forum. I mean, could it be through that liaison committee,
What's interesting, I think she'll probably start by trying to talk to people like Keir Starmer, people like Hilary Benn, who is the Brexit Select Committee chairman, and just try and find a way of how does an amendment get suggested that is not necessarily from the government but emerges from the House of Commons, and how do you keep trying to find the phrases and the words which will just push it over the top, because they are allergic to having a second referendum. Both the Conservative Party and the Labour leadership are allergic to that. She's not going to push for a general election and she'll win the confidence vote tomorrow.
Is a bloke shot, but if it goes that way, the Brexit gets softer and softer and softer. We know that's the mood in the House of Commons.
Absolutely. So I think the only thing that there would be a majority for at the moment is some form of soft Brexit. Labour's made their position very clear about the importance of the customs union and the single market. So the agony for the Conservative Party is, even if they can get some kind of deal through, if the government can get some kind of soft Brexit version through, Europe goes on dogging the party for the foreseeable future. Brexit then does not go away. I think we could see the formation of a new political party. We would see the Conservative Party deeply split. Let's not forget where the Tory members stand on this. Most of them, a decent number of them, are quite comfortable with the idea of no deal and will be utterly outraged at a soft Brexit, and they will not forgive MPs who have pushed that forward.
Be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, Bernard Bogdan. Or a new party. I mean, the sense that the Prime Minister could sacrifice her party for the good of the country.
Well, it does raise the whole question of party realignment, because obviously the Conservative Party is divided down the middle. on Europe. Labour's divided down the middle on Corbyn's leadership. Indeed, the majority of Labour MPs, as was shown in 2016, were against Corbyn's leadership because by about a 4-to-1 majority they passed no confidence in him, but he carried on regardless. So in a system in which it was easy to form new parties, if, for example, we had proportional representation, we might well see breakaways from both parties. But of course we don't have that system. We have first past the post, and the penalties for forming a new party are pretty heavy, as the SDP found out in the 1980s. So that may be unlikely in the immediate future. But, I mean, Isabel Oakeshott made an important point, I think, that the softer the Brexit, the more hostile many Conservative MPs will be to Theresa May. And I'm doubtful whether there's some magic bullet that you can get from consulting members of Parliament as to what solution would command a majority. And people are talking about various magic bullets. Norway, without perhaps having gone into the Norwegian situation very closely, a customs union, a second referendum. All these things are at least as divisive as the deal, which has just been rejected.
But crucially, are they as divisive as no deal? And I think that if you speak to people in the House of Commons, the one thing that they are totally allergic to is the idea of crashing out of the EU without a deal, and they think that that would be a major problem.
Uncharted territory, as the Prime Minister said herself. I want to go back to Central Lobby, and Beth Rigby is one of the key players in all this, the man who resigned when the origins of this agreement were unveiled to the Cabinet back in July at Chequers. Beth.
Yeah, that's right, Dermot. Hello, I'm here with Mr Johnson, who, as you said, resigned from Cabinet over Chequers, couldn't back Chequers, wanted it chucked. It wasn't chucked, and now look where we are. Mr Johnson, 1 in 3 Conservative MPs voting against their Prime Minister, a 230 vote defeat. Are you astonished? How would you describe it? What adjective would you use?
Look, it's bigger than the margin of defeat for the government is bigger than I expected. It's no particular cause for rejoicing for me, because after all, I've been trying for so long to get the government, back in the place that the Prime Minister was in her Lancaster House speech in January last year, when we were really talking about taking advantage of Brexit with real free trade deals, really taking back control of our laws. And then all that got lost as we moved into this quicksand of the Northern Irish backstop, locked into the customs union, locked into the single market. So what she has now, in my view, is a massive mandate, 432 votes against her deal. She takes it back to Brussels and she says, we can't do this deal as it is. We need a fresh approach. And that's got to be keeping the good bits, looking after, making sure we protect the rights of the 3.2 million European Union citizens here in the UK. Very important. Keeping the stuff that's been agreed about current cases before the European...
Sorry, just to be clear, with 73 days to go, you think she should go back and begin the negotiations again and extend Article 50 to do so?
No, you don't need to do that at all. Because as I was just saying, there are bits of the withdrawal agreement that are fine. The stuff on citizens, the stuff on the court, keep all that. The current case before the court. Take out, excise, surgically remove the backstop. Okay, that's the problem. That's the lobster pot. That's the trap that keeps us locked in the customs union and means we have this terrible Hobson's choice between, as it were, sacrificing Northern Ireland or remaining subject to the EU without having any say in the EU. So that's the trap. That needs to come out. And what we need to do then is use the implementation period, which runs from March 29th for a couple of years, 18 months or more, to do the free trade agreement. That is eminently doable when you consider that the UK and the EU are already completely aligned.
So just to summarise, what you think she should do is go back to Brussels, get the backstop taken out of the withdrawal agreement and crack on with the deal.
Crack on. And what she should not do, just to be clear, what she should not do, and picking up some rumours around this place, what I think would be absolutely fatal would be to do any more kind of parliamentary plottery and jiggery-pokery and coming up with schemes to either to delay Article 50 or to come up with a second referendum.
Okay, but let's make this argument that her deal was, as a Brexiteer as you are, her deal was the Brexiteers' chance to leave on March the 29th with a deal, and you have emphatically voted her down. Now your colleague, you're a minority in Parliament, a massive minority in Parliament, you Brexiteers who want this sort of clean Brexit, if you like. You voted her down, and Parliament are going to take control now, and you've blown it, haven't you?
Well, except that, don't forget, Parliament entrusted the people with this decision about their destiny. Parliament said in 2015, folks, do you want to be in the European Union or not? They said emphatically, by a margin of more than a million, they wanted to leave. 82% of MPs in this place then campaigned on manifestos to come out of the customs union, come out of the single market. We have to deliver on that commitment. Plus, final point, Beth, I know you've got to go, but we also voted to trigger Article 50, which ineluctably means that we come out.
I do need to go, but I can't let you go without asking you this. She's lost by 230 votes. As I said, 1 in 3 Conservatives voting her down. Could she realistically carry on as Prime Minister? She's got absolutely no power left or authority at all.
But we in the Conservative Party, we went through all that in December of last year, as you recall. That's not the issue.
Isn't the honourable thing to step down at this point?
The issue is not the person.
What would you do personally?
The issue, I would do exactly what I've just said, and I hope very much that's what the PM.
So she still has your full back, and you think she should carry on?
I certainly vote for her and for the Conservative government tomorrow in the division lobbies, because one thing I do not want is Jeremy Corbyn taking over as our Prime Minister. I'll tell you that much for free.
OK, thank you very much, Mr Johnson. Well, there you have it, Dermot. Mr Johnson thinks she can go back and crack on and do the deal again. And I'm joined here now by Sammy Wilson from the DUP. Mr Wilson, thank you for joining us. How are you going to vote tomorrow in this confidence vote in the Prime Minister's government?
We will support the government tomorrow. I mean, we have an agreement with the government. We want to see them through the 5-year term in Parliament. They lost their way, and we, along with nearly half of our own party, voted against her tonight. But we want to get the government back on track, where it delivers on its manifesto, where it delivers on the commitments which it made to us in the Conference and Supply Agreement, and where it also delivers on the promises that the Prime Minister made since she was elected as Prime Minister.
Mr Johnson there was suggesting that she should go back to Brussels, get the backstop taken out of the withdrawal agreement and crack on with her deal. Is that what you think?
Well, the backstop has been the problem in all of this, because the backstop does two things. First of all, it splits up the United Kingdom, it removes Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom, and secondly, it was going to be used, and the EU made it quite clear, it was going to be used as a kind of a barrel to push Britain over when it came to the negotiations on the future relationship. It was to be the basis of the future relationship, something totally unacceptable. So he is quite right. Remove the toxic bit of the agreement, and then let's move on and establish a good relationship with the EU, which can be beneficial to them and beneficial to us.
Mr Wilson, it's pretty unlikely, that the EU will remove the backstop. This has been a key requirement of the Irish government. It's been something that the EU27 have supported, indeed the Prime Minister. If she can't do anything more on the backstop, what should she do?
Well, first of all, it's been a requirement which is not necessary. And, I've said time and time again...
Yeah, I take that, but what should she do? If she can't change anything on the backstop, she's tried her hardest, she's gone back and forth and back and forth. What next?
Well, she tried her hardest, but the EU never believed that this would be rejected, and rejected in this way by Parliament. The EU are now faced with a situation where the deal which they so longed for, because it was so good for them, is not going to be deliverable. So they can sit on their hands and wait until the 29th of March, and then the problem is solved because it's away anyhow. We leave without any agreement, so it disappears. They don't have the embarrassment of having to step back. They simply have to accept that it's gone, and then they start negotiating. Or else, if they want to move much more quickly and bring some more stability and confidence to their own countries, then they can start being realistic from tomorrow. and start dealing with the Prime Minister in a way which is much more even-handed than what we have had so far.
OK, thank you, Mr Wilson. Well, there you have it. In terms of the confidence vote, Mr Wilson confirming again what he told me earlier, which is that the DUP will vote with Theresa May in that confidence vote tomorrow. So as it stands tonight, unless a number of her own MPs who voted her down tonight decide to completely implode their government and go for an election in which their jobs are up for grabs too, it looks like she'll survive tomorrow. As for her Brexit deal, well, that's an entirely different question.
Yeah, Beth, very, very interesting indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Back with you soon, Beth Rigby there in Central Lobby. And I want to reflect with my panel on some of the comments that Beth got there from Sammy Wilson from the DUP and, of course, the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson and Isabel Oakeshott, both kind of making the same point in terms of everyone wants to know what happens next. And their recommendation being you stick to the deadline, March the 29th, but in between time, you can go back to the EU. They'll take the backstop out of the withdrawal agreement and everything will be fine. There's some unicorns in there.
About that, I mean, I thought that was an astonishing intervention from Boris Johnson. He seems to me to have, let's hope, very temporarily taken leave of his senses. What he was proposing there was that in the remaining time available, which I don't think is as catastrophically short as some people are suggesting, but nonetheless, he was suggesting that she has time to go back and ask the EU to do something that they have persistently refused to do all this time. And he's gone wildly off message as far as Brexiteers are concerned. The message I might have expected to hear from him tonight would be to say, this is obviously dead, this deal, let's go for the World Trade Organization, let us just crash out, as people are opposed to it would say. But the idea that she can go back to Brussels and renegotiate, it's pie in the sky.
OK, I mean, Craig Oliver and Sammy Wilson made the point that the size of the defeat, he thinks, could almost be an advantage when going back to the European Union. They'll be so shocked by the size of the defeat that they'll reopen the withdrawal agreement.
Well, we've just heard magical thinking time and time again from Brexiteers throughout this process. You know, people are going to be desperate to flog us their Prosecco and their German cars, and all we need is plucky bits just to go to Europe and tell them what's what. That has been exposed over the last 2.5 years as a serious problem. There are 27 other nations who are more interested in making sure that Ireland, a member, is sorted out than somebody who is leaving. It is a fantastical solution. It is extraordinary at this time that anybody would say that, but we've just seen it.
Your reaction, Bernard Bogdan?
Well, there's a great deal of misunderstanding about the backstop. I think no one wants to see a customs border or regulations imposed between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, which would be ruinous for the economy of both parts of the island of Ireland. And the question is, how do you stop that happening? Now, one way would obviously be to stay in the customs union. That would be one way of doing it. Another way is to find some technological development which would obviate the need for that, which no one has yet discovered. If you can't do either of those two things, then let us have something like the deal. And the deal does give Northern Ireland access to the EU's internal market without needing to accept all the regulations of the internal market. The EU think they conceded too much on that. And it keeps the whole of the United Kingdom with the tariff and quota-free trade in the customs union without actually being members of it and without the obligations. So the EU won't go any further. Now, if you reject the backstop, you have to find a way of avoiding a border in Ireland, which no one wants. And that, despite what Sammy Wilson says, a border in Ireland would actually encourage Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, because they would say, we're now cut off from our nationalist and Catholic friends in the south. This is not what the Good Friday Agreement's about. Let's resume our campaign for Irish unity. So I think the backstop is both a good deal for Britain.
But it seems like we've almost gone back to the start of the negotiations.
And it's fair to say most of the business community in Northern Ireland and the farming community are in favour of the deal, despite the DUP, because they're terrified of customs duties with the Republic.
Listen, I'm sorry to cut you off there. We want to go back again. There's so much happening. We want to go back to the House of Commons again. There more cabinet reaction from the Transport Secretaries with Beth Rigby now.
Yes, that's right, Dermot. Mr Grayling is with me. Mr Grayling, thank you for joining us on Sky News. That was quite a quick response from the Prime Minister there. Was this gamed out in Cabinet this morning about what you would do when she lost?
Not specifically as regards the tactics. We had an extensive discussion about what should happen next. Cabinet very clearly behind the Prime Minister, recognising that if the vote wasn't won, we would have to move fairly rapidly to reassure. I think the Prime Minister did the right thing tonight, setting out, first of all, that she would seek a motion of confidence in the House tomorrow. That's clearly come. It's really important that she knows tomorrow that Parliament still has confidence in her and her government. I think that's what will happen, but it's absolutely right that that issue should be addressed straight away. She's then said there will be discussions, first of all, with Conservative colleagues, secondly, with our confidence and supply partners in the DUP, but also across the House to senior parliamentarians. What we have to do is identify Parliament, having said we won't take this approach, what will Parliament accept? We've heard a lot today about what people are opposed to. It really is time for everybody to come out now with what they're in favour of.
Mr Grayling, can I just ask you, some of your cabinet colleagues, and I'm thinking here David Gauke, Amber Rudd, on the different side of the divide to you, as a Brexiteer, they think that there should potentially be some indicative votes, some free votes in the Commons to try and find out where the majority sits. Do you disagree with that as an idea?
Well, I don't think we need to have indicative votes. What the Prime Minister said tonight was that she would, as set out in the motion that was passed last week, she'll make a statement on Monday. She'll bring an amendable motion to the House after that. But I think it's really time for the Labour Party in particular to say, what is it actually in favour of? Is it trying to overturn Brexit? It certainly looks like it. Is it trying to extend Article 50? It certainly feels like that might be the case. And that there are arguments about the customs union. Keeping the customs union effectively means staying in the single market and keeping free movement. Are Labour in favour of keeping free movement?
Just finally, Mr Grayling, a 230 vote defeat, nothing we've seen certainly in the past century. When that number landed, what did you think? How did you feel? Were you shocked?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't entirely surprised. It's been pretty clear for some time that the vote was likely to be lost by a significant margin. I think now the question to parliamentarians on all sides is, OK, so what do you want? It's no good being constantly opposed to things. You've actually got to decide what you do want and set it out and win the confidence of Parliament for it. That's what the Prime Minister is now seeking to do.
OK, thank you, Mr Grayling. So there you have it, Mr Grayling saying that the Prime Minister will now consult with Conservative colleagues, followed by the DUP, followed by some other senior parliamentarians to see if she can find a way forward. It feels pretty chaotic tonight, I have to say. Back to you.
Certainly does, Beth. Thank you very much indeed, Beth Rigby there. Well, we want to get some reaction from Europe now. We've already heard via Twitter from the European Council, the European Commission, both more or less saying how disappointed they are and pointing out that the clock is ticking. Well, Mairead McGuinness is first Vice President of the European Parliament. She joins me now from Strasbourg. A very good evening to you, Ms McGuinness. Tell us this and your reaction to this vote.
Well, it's certainly a significant vote. It's a very significant evening. I think that there is clarity on one issue, that the House of Commons does not like this deal. But I would be very cautious, and I was listening to some of the commentary before you came to me about the entire focus being on the Irish backstop, because we need to analyse why people in the House of Commons voted a particular way. Remember, because they want to remain in the European Union and wanted to make their intentions clear in the hope perhaps of a second referendum. Others voted because they want a hard Brexit. Some of course have concerns around the backstop, but I was concerned when I heard the commentary which suggested that that is the only issue. And I think what is clear is that there is no support for this deal in the House of Commons. There is no support for a no deal. But what is there support for? And until we know that, I'm afraid that there is still uncertainty around the mindset within the United Kingdom.
Is there any prospect of reopening that withdrawal agreement? I don't know if you said you were listening in. We had an interview with the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson a little bit earlier, and indeed Sammy Wilson, Brexit spokesman for the Democratic Unionist Party, both suggesting that something could be done between now and the end of March about the backstop, that perhaps it could be taken out.
Well, perhaps I need to repeat what I said. I think the focus entirely on the backstop is completely misplaced. Of course it is an issue, but the idea that you could come back to Europe and say, guess what, that we want rid of that 1/3 of the withdrawal agreement would be dropped by the European Union, which doesn't just involve Ireland, and clearly I'm from Ireland myself, but also is a European Union issue around how we deal with the sensitivities of history and geography on the island of Ireland. And I think that the British Prime Minister herself is very sensitive to that issue, as many in the House of Commons are. So I think that the idea of simply taking this result as a reopening or a demand to reopen the withdrawal agreement is not how I read it now. We will have to listen carefully, because tomorrow there is further debate around a confidence motion for the British Prime Minister, which I think she's expected to win, and therefore she will have to, if you like, come forward and chart the next stage of this process. And I've said it previously, which may sound strange, that at least today we have certainty around the uncertainty. That's a first step. And I'm afraid we now have to work very hard as politicians, both European and United Kingdom, to make sure that we deliver for citizens and that we can reach an agreement by the Brexit date of the end of March.
OK, you think that can still happen? Because that was my next question. You talk about the mists of uncertainty. I mean, can they clear in time for the scheduled exit of the UK from the European Union?
Well, look, some colleagues in the House here believe that even if the deal had been accepted today, that it might be difficult to get all of the legalities sorted by the end of March. So I think you are right to ask the question, can, with this uncertainty, that deadline be actually met at this point? And I think that's not clear. But again, the United Kingdom are going to have to look at that possibility. There is a speculation, even before the vote, that an extension of Article 50 might be required. But then for how long and for what purpose? But I still come back to our core mission as politicians is not to fail citizens. I live and represent a border region on the island of Ireland. The people I represent want a good deal between Europe and the United Kingdom, and we want the principle of the backstop honoured as that insurance policy, but we want it never to be used. So I think if we think about those we represent, as I hope colleagues in the House of Commons will think about, then perhaps wiser counsel can prevail, and the British Prime Minister, who I believe has shown quite extraordinary resilience, even in her reaction today to that enormous defeat, I believe that she will have to carry this burden further and work harder to deliver a deal that will work for both the United Kingdom and the European Union.
OK, First Vice President, thank you very much indeed. Mairead McGuinness there of the European Parliament joining me from Strasbourg. We're going straight back to the House of Commons and that confusion and uncertainty that Mairead McGuinness described and we've all seen this evening. It seems it's up to the MPs themselves to decide the way forward. And my colleague Beth Rigby, our Deputy Political Editor, has got two MPs from different parties to ask them what they want.
Hi, Dermot. Yeah, I'm joined now by Tobias Ellwood, a Defence Minister, and Hilary Benn, the Chair of the Select Committee that pulled that amendment this morning in order to see that meaningful vote go through in all its glory or disaster for the Prime Minister, depending on your opinion. I'm going to come to you first, Mr Ellwood. You said this weekend that you would resign as a Minister if the Prime Minister did not rule out no deal. She hasn't done it yet. Where are we?
She made very clear the concerns that I think is right across the House, that a no deal would not be good for Britain. It would be very damaging economically and so forth. However, there is a default position that if we do not strike a deal, we end up in that position. And that's what we need to be careful of. What happened today, a huge defeat, but we tested the will of Parliament on the deal that has been worked on for 2 years, that gained agreement by 27 nations, but Parliament has voted it down. She's now made very clear to see, is there a consensus across the House? Can we do our duty as we're expected by the nation to see whether there is something that links us all together? The reason why this was voted down, not because there's another idea looming there that everybody wants to jump on. We didn't hear anything from the leader of the opposition to say this is my idea. All they want to do is have a general election and be opportunists. What the Prime Minister will now do, if I can finish, is to see whether all the caucuses across the group actually have something in the middle that we can actually rally around.
And Mr Benn, you obviously had an amendment that's ruled out no deal and ruled out May's deal. Were you encouraged when she talked about trying to build consensus across the House? Can you see a way forward?
Well, I welcome the fact, because I expressed the hope that she would do so, that she said she will reach out. But the really big question is, she should have done this 2.5 years ago, and secondly, will she listen to what she hears? So, for example, people may say to her, you know what, we're going to have to stay in a customs union to achieve the objectives you set. For 2 years, she said, no, we're not going to stay in a customs union. I was, however, encouraged by one thing, and it's the point that Tobias raised. She said the government will not run down the clock. Now, the consequence of that is she should now immediately say, under no circumstances will the government allow us to leave with no deal, because business